Those are actually some of my favorite headphones that we make. The I series, the i4s especially, are really, really good.
Yeah, I agree.
Mark
If I
likes
could
them
only have
too.
one pair of headphones, it would probably have to be these.
I would have to agree with that, just because they're so easy, because you have lightning cable, you have Bluetooth, you have, regular, aux cable. You can plug them into anything, and they just sound great.
Yeah, they're
And they're
very
small.
versatile.
And anyways, hello, Nicholas. It's really good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I don't look as good as you do, though. You've got like a DSLR with a capture card or something,
Yeah.
right?
I've got an Elgato capture card, and then I plug my my Sony A6000 into it, and it's
I
just.
like it.
Yeah, Grover's good about the fancy toys.
By the way, for our audience who may not know, this is Nicholas Tolson from Linear Tube Audio. Linear Tube Audio makes fantastic tube gear. How you guys are a newer company? How long have you been around?
New-ish. I think
Newish.
we would have been, I haven't been there since the beginning, but I think we celebrated our 6th anniversary this summer.
Okay.
Could be wrong, could be 7, but yeah, 6
All
or
right.
7.
Oh, okay. So a little bit longer actually than I realized. But they make fantastic headphone amps. They make amazing stereo gear. I've tried out the preamplifier and some of your guys' integrated amps, and they blew me away.
Thank you.
So all around awesome gear, really nice guys. I've talked with Mark. I've talked with Nicholas. Talked with some of their folks at LTA, and wonderful company, small, passionate, audiophiles, kind of like us. So we're really excited to
We're
have you
slightly
here.
smaller than you
Yeah,
are
a little bit smaller than Audeze.
Yeah.
But also passionate audiophiles. So
No doubt.
it's been my pleasure to meet LTA folks at shows and listen to their gear in the past and things like that. So I'm really excited to be here today. Obviously myself, and then Chris Behrens, who our audience is probably familiar with at this point. And we're here to talk about music. Chris, you had yeah. Chris, you had a wonderful idea. Do you want to kind of start us off with talking about some of your top picks? So we each pick, 5 albums and or 5 live shows to talk about that were game changers for us. Talk about them for 1 minute, what they meant to you, why they were cool. Just defining moments in your musical life. And I have a few follow-up questions if we have any time after that. So
I kind of put together, I pulled out 5 records that for this thing, I took the approach of, I don't know, I just randomly got this theme a few minutes ago when I was kind of pulling stuff out to share with you guys. And the thing that kind of came to mind was I have this kind of small collection of records that were sort of reimagined or remixed or whatever, expanded, as often happens with catalog stuff, kind of redone in some way beyond just the simple remastering and or adding bonus tracks or whatever it is. And there's a few of them that kind of jumped out to me that like these were really major like improvements on the original or the earlier version that I had. So I'll just jump into this one. This is obviously a jazz classic. And it came out originally as a series of, I think, 10-inch records. The recordings were all made in 48 to 50, somewhere around there. So they're all mono, and I always had the CD issue from the first. I never had the original 10-inch LPs because those are hard to get. But I had the CD, and then there was like a kind of budget priced vinyl issue that came out decades ago. And it was always like, yeah, I love these recordings. The music's amazing, changed the face of jazz. Never thought they sounded particularly great. But then when they released this version, which is a double LP with a big fat book in it, with essays and track by track kind of, lots of photos and stuff. So the first disc is the original sessions, and it just knocked me out how great this record sounded. It just was, to me, like a revelation. I think this was the first time they ever had been put out as a full analog transfer of the original tapes, beyond those original 10-inch releases. So like even the LP and stuff that were from before, I think it was like a digital or a later generation analog master. The pressing quality is amazing. Super flat, thick, beautiful vinyl, with the original kind of label, done in a really good way. Like they paid attention. They put it in a nice plastic lined sleeve, really thick tipped on cover. And then you get this bonus besides that in the book, you get this second disc of live stuff from that same period.
Nice.
Recorded in September of 1948 with a lot of the original guys playing a lot of the original tunes. And those were radio broadcasts. So they definitely don't sound as good as the studio sessions do, but I would have paid what I paid for this, which was, 25 or $30 for just the one disc. And the fact that they added that second one and went to all this length to get this great quality, amazing printing, super awesome sound. I mean, I can't recommend this record enough.
Do you know who did the cutting on that, Chris?
I was going to ask that myself. Who did or the pressing?
It says Capitol up in the top right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a UME.
Okay. It might have been cut by Capitol.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Okay. Yeah. They've got a good cutting rig, and the engineer,
unfortunately they're shutting it down. Did you see that?
Yeah, they did. Well, he was kind of semi-retired already. He wasn't really doing a lot. He would come out of retirement for special projects like that, but they had they have a pretty solid Neumann VMS 80, I think, cutting lathe there. And they did good work. Yeah. And that guy was like old school. Like he used to cut records back in the day. He was a mastering engineer, before digital stuff. He really didn't do any mixes or modern.
Was that Ron McMaster?
Yes. Yeah, it was Ron.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm looking at the Dead Wax trying to find some sort of, it doesn't have the typical mastered by Capitol stamp that you would find, but
okay. It might've been done by someone else.
Some initials, but I can't.
Because he didn't do everything that came through.
Yeah.
AB. KB. Oh, KB.
KB. I don't know. It probably says in the credits. There's lots of credits in here, obviously.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I haven't really looked. I don't think I paid that much attention to who did it when I first got it, because I was more interested in, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And just listening to it, getting reabsorbed. Obviously, I've been listening to this record for a couple decades.
Oh, and jazz, in my opinion, its natural habitat is live, and so I love live versions of jazz albums or jazz tunes, and they might not always be the best, but like when you're at a live show, it's the energy and the spontaneous interplay, and you're getting what they were standing up there playing, rather than any sort of studio trickery.
There's a lot of energy to the live session, but there's also a similar energy in the recorded, the studio sessions. And you can see from the photos, we're going way beyond 1 minute here. That's okay. But you can tell like that's a photo from the original session.
Love that. That's so cool.
This is classic, like 1950-ish. Oh, this is a really good photo, actually. Look at that. You can see way back in the back, the drummer in a little booth, but everybody else is basically playing into a couple of microphones.
Yeah.
Everybody's in one room except the drummer.
Even back then, jazz was not as commercially, viable as it had been in, say, the 20s, 30s, even 40s. But the 50s and 60s, jazz records sold, but they weren't big, generally they weren't huge sellers by that point. And so oftentimes studio time was quite precious, especially for, the kind of bebop musicians who generally they weren't making tons of money. So what would happen was they would scrape together some cash and pay for a recording session. And they would say, throw some microphones in. We're coming in for like an hour or two. We're going to blast through these tunes as quick as possible. And Miles or Coltrane or whoever was doing the recording, whoever's the band leader, would basically slap down some music or sometimes just drawings or just chord numbers in front of people. And he'd be like, all right, it kind of goes like this and this sort of thing. And they would go, and it was like a lot of that stuff was first take, ultra raw. The recording engineer really didn't do maybe fader moves, but there was almost no mixing even on some of those. You can hear some of it is literally first
1 or 2 tracks.
Yeah, is like first run fader moves. Like they do the first run fader moves. They might pan a few things, and that's it. That's like all the mixing you would get for a lot of those albums. So they're very, very close to the metal, like very raw.
Here we go. Mastering Robert Voskian, Capitol Studios.
Okay, he might have been. I think he was one of the. There was 3 engineers they had there. I mean, Ron McMaster was one, but he was kind of retired and has been for a long time. But they had 2 other ones.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my first expedition, I guess.
Nice.
This is
Awesome.
an amazing record. It's still available. I bought it pretty recently just from Amazon, and it was easy to get and cheap. So if you're into that kind of stuff, grab it.
I find that record a good record to introduce people to Miles with, because they don't get crazy, right? Yeah.
You can understand what's going on even if you're not a jazz fan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
They're very
pretty chill.
Tunes
exactly.
In that sense of like easy to follow and fun, but the playing is great. And you know, Gil Evans had a lot of influence on the arrangements, as well as a couple other guys who were kind of from that same school, same era, and just, you know, amazing arrangements. Okay, moving on, because I don't want us to run out of time and want to hear what you guys have to say. So my next one will be this. We're jumping a few decades here, but this is the 2017 Tony Visconti remix of David Bowie's Lodger album, which originally came out in the box set of that mid-period stuff. So this is one of the three Eno records that they did, you know, the Berlin trilogy, as they called it. I think this one was actually recorded in Switzerland mostly, but it's that same kind of crew. Like, this was always a really great record to me. It's got I Am the DJ and some of the, you know, singles from that era, which were amazing, but there's the deeper tracks on this are so great, but I always thought the mix was really weird and kind of boxy and mid-rangey and stuff. But you know, in the liner notes in the box set book, Visconti explains how he was able to go back and finally give this the time that it deserved. Because at the time when it was released, they just didn't have time to really get the mix right. And he was never super happy with it. So he got David's blessing toward the end of his life. So David heard a few of the original tracks that he was experimenting with and then passed away. So he never heard the whole album remixed, but he loved what was happening at first. And I've emailed with Tony several times, and he said, you know, he's 100% sure that David would have loved this album in its remixed version. And I absolutely agree. It's just an amazing record. So I've been like obsessing over this record again, you know, after having listened to it for a long time, just by virtue of now you can hear everything that's going on, and all the toms and drums and everything have the impact that they never had before. So this was, like I said, originally just in the Who Can I Be Now box set, which was 200 and something bucks, and that's when I bought it. But now you can just get it as an LP on its own. Mastering's great, pressing quality is great. At least this version was, you know, done in the UK, I believe. It's all European, heavyweight vinyl, super nice, and really faithfully reproduced, but with a slightly different cover variation than the non-remixed version, which is also available as a remastered. So this is the one for me.
Nice.
Amazing music just all around. Okay, so that's selection number 2. Selection number 3 is this. And everyone's probably going, who the hell is that? For those of you who don't know, there was this UK band called Felt in the 80s. And they made 10 albums and 10 singles in 10 years and then broke up. That was the plan. So I can't remember if it was like 1980 to 1990 or something like that. But
that was
anyway,
the plan from the beginning.
Yeah, like that was the guy Lawrence who sort of started the band. He's like, this is what I want to do.
He had a vision.
I want to make the best pop records ever made, you know, and then quit. And so that's kind of what they did. For me, the first 4 are the ones. And this is, I think, the 4th of them. This one was co-produced by Robin Guthrie, who is a member of Cocteau Twins, guitar player, and Elizabeth Fraser, who is kind of his singing partner in that band, sings vocals on some of the tracks. But it's sort of like an early shoegaze, I guess you would call it, or like kind of dream pop, more like dream pop. This originally came out in 1985, and I have an original pressing also. Pressed in France, very nice, good sounding record, you know, for mid 80s pop stuff. But then what they did on this reissue was, I guess Lawrence was never super happy with Robin Guthrie's production on some of the vocal numbers, and you can hear why. The vocals are sort of pushed back and encased in this giant reverb, and things are sort of mushy and gauzy sounding, which is totally Robin Guthrie style. If you like Cocteau Twins, then you appreciate that, and I definitely do. I love his mixes, but I was also super excited by the fact that I was really skeptical about having 4 of the tracks on this remixed. And they were remixed, by the way, by the original engineer. So the guy was at the sessions. He knows what was going on, and he's had his ears on this the whole time. But he kind of remixed them in a way that just brought out the clarity and kind of pushed the vocals forward a little bit, kind of closed in a little bit. So everything is really present now. And then the rest of it was just kind of faithfully remastered and pressed on a nice vinyl and done really well. Again, quality pressing. And I can play these two. Sometimes I play one side of this one, then I flip it and play the other side of this one just to see how they compare. And it holds up really well. I was surprised. The first version I heard of this remaster was a digital version. And I thought, oh man, they ruined it. It's slammed. Like they just brick walled the hell out of it and pushed it up, loudness wars, that kind of thing. And I hated it. And I was really skeptical. But then I found another LP cheap enough that I thought, okay, I'll take a risk. And I bought it, one of the earlier ones. And I was really surprised. It sounded really good. So I bought the rest of them eventually. And this one kind of jumps out at me because this is the only one where they did that kind of surgery. So it's amazing to have both versions and to be able to compare. But I really actually find myself listening more to the remixed version. So, and by the way, if you like electric guitar playing or acoustic guitar playing, this guy, the lead guitarist in this band, his name is Maurice DeBank. He was amazing. Like, if you like kind of Johnny Marr style from the Smiths, that's kind of the direction that he went in. Yeah. It's wonderful guitar playing. And that's, to me, that's the main thing, because I'm a guitar player and I enjoy all the aspects, but the guitar playing is really the main thing. And he was only on the first 4 records, which is why I kind of obsess over those over the last 6. But this is kind of the meeting point of what happened. Was this guy came in on organ on this record. And then after this record, Maurice DeBank, the guitar player, left. And so then it was just Martin Duffy playing all these keyboard leads, which are really cool, but I'm more of a guitar aficionado. So that's kind of where I jumped in. So amazing record. Okay. Trying to keep it brief. Sorry.
You know too much.
One. I know too much. Next one. Dun, 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 dun. This guy, somebody probably knows who this guy is without seeing his name.
Never heard.
Yeah. This was I don't know if this is really a reimagining of anything, but this is a record that came out in 2004.
I'm like super jealous that you have the vinyl of that. That's one of my favorite
This is
albums.
new. That's what's cool. This was never released on vinyl when it first came out. 2004, it was just CD. Yeah. And I worked at a record store at the time, and I was a Prince fan already, and I didn't really like a lot of his stuff during that era. It was really wishy-washy and kind of like, But this came out and I was like, whoa, he's back. This is awesome. And I loved this record since the moment it came out. And then they reissued it recently when in 2019, this was published on vinyl.
Okay.
It's still available. I got it again from Amazon. Beautiful purple vinyl, kind of transparent and marbly.
Fancy.
It looks blue on the screen, but it's really purple.
Yeah.
I think it's just a lighting thing, but really well pressed, really well recorded in, the style that Prince recorded in, which was basically him playing everything in overdub fashion. So everything's really close mic'd and like present and right there. The songs are great. His singing is awesome. He's got some people playing on the record that do really well. It's almost as good as his records with the Revolution, which for me were obviously his pinnacle, Purple Rain. Never got better than that. Sorry, Prince. But so that was one that I was surprised how good this was. And I'm so glad to finally have it on vinyl. And it's 2 LPs also in that weird gatefold with the extra flap. All the lyrics are there and everything. Really cool record. So
if it wasn't for reissues like that, the vinyl resurgence, quote unquote, wouldn't be here. If you look at any of the data for the past however many years, at least 9 out of the 10, maybe 10 out of the 10, some years of the top selling records are records that are 30 years old.
Yeah.
Or,
right.
25.
To me, that's a big deal. Like, I think it goes hand in hand. The vinyl resurgence wouldn't exist without those kind of reissues and reimaginings, but also we wouldn't be able to make those if people weren't buying them. So, in the 90s when vinyl was supposedly dead, prices were really low, not much sold. Late 90s, early 2000s, I worked in a record store during that time for about 5 years, and vinyl was, passe. I still loved it, and a lot of people did, but it didn't. You know, the record store that I worked in still exists. They've expanded. When I worked there, it was like 80% CDs and 10% vinyl, and 10% other stuff. And now it's like probably 70% vinyl as far as their floor space. And they've expanded. They've moved into a much bigger space, and they're doing great.
Wow.
Even through the pandemic,
awesome.
They seem to be doing okay. So I'm glad to see that. And I really think it's all about, because people really realized the value of the vinyl LP, the sort of physical experience of it. Those who really dig it.
Well, there's a huge sound advantage too, right? Because vinyl is generally the only way to hear something without a limiter on it nowadays. There's
a lot of the time, yeah.
There's almost no music that you can hear without even jazz and bluegrass. Classical, some you can hear unlimited. Some jazz and bluegrass, but outside of those genres, there is.
You mean because of the nature of digital distortion?
Yeah, well, no, just mastering engineers just push everything to -10 LUFS. That's just the standard, and it's still the loudness wars. They're over in the sense that the loudness won, right? And it's you know, I should put you in touch with some of the mastering engineers I know, because they have an interesting perspective on this, and it's just like the artists just want it loud as all get out.
Yeah,
you know?
It's got to compete. Even though
it's got to compete on a playlist.
Much to compete with anymore, because a lot of the software that we're using now already does that sort of leveling, auto leveling. You know. Yeah,
that's an interesting discussion. We should actually do probably a video about that at some point, Chris, because it is interesting. Even though Spotify normalizes things, there are strategies you can do to like loudinate stuff that do still work and push past that. So it's like, if you've loudinated
this jump out of the speakers,
right? Yeah. So it's
unfortunately then it's just all, hey, here's your music.
2D right up in your face. But
that's the perfect segue to move to my last selection, which is probably the king of all reissues, and that is the 9 LP version of Tom Petty, Wildflowers and All the Rest. I bought this on vinyl when it first came out. Not this, but the original. I still have the original pressing. Which is in a very similar kind of paper with the similar pictures and all that. And I always loved that record. I thought it was amazing. Never thought it was a great sounding LP. And I found out why when they put this out, because the engineer talked a lot during the press for this about how they originally recorded on analog at Sound City studios in LA and a couple other places in LA. And they were, recording a lot of things live on the floor to analog tape. But when they went to make the LP, they used the CD master to make the LP. So the LP master is a version of the CD master, just dumped to vinyl. This is obviously 1995 or 6 or something. I forget the exact year, 94 or 96, when digital was still kind of new and taking over. Nobody really cared that much about vinyl, but hey, it's Tom Petty, so we're going to put it out on LP, right? And it's Warner Brothers, so they still were releasing vinyl, but they weren't paying a lot of attention to it. But the first 2 LPs are the original LP, mastered and pressed from the original analog tapes with no digital stages in between, which in and of itself is an amazing sound difference. Like I did some comparison between my original one and this, and there's just no comparison. It's amazing sounding. So that's only 2 of the 9 LPs. The rest, what the heck is all that? Apparently, they did a lot of extra recordings. Petty wanted this to be a 2 CD album to start with, and where it ended up being trimmed back to 1 CD, which was a double LP. But so there's a 3rd LP of stuff that was kind of originally intended to be on the record, but they cut it for, you know how it is with labels. They talk to labels and labels go, no, that's too long. We want to make it shorter. Just focus on the hits, whatever. So there's some really cool stuff that was full on intended to be on there. And they kind of added it back as the all the rest stuff. And then there's 2 LPs of Tom Petty's home demos, which, you think home demo and you go, okay, he had a cassette recorder or something, a Porta, whatever in the corner. And you're going to get like these kind of tinny sounding little things. No, he had like an 8-track 1/2-inch thing with good mics and a nice quiet space. these are just like haunting, beautiful early renditions. He was at the peak of his songwriting, and like the song Wildflowers, apparently he wrote it as he played it the first time. So he set up the microphones, played his acoustic guitar and sang, and that was the song, and he never changed a word. He was just like so on it. And there's some stuff that he did with Mike Campbell and stuff where they would come in and you kind of like flesh these out. Like, this is what we want the record to sound like. And so you have like the demo records are just astounding, like really good quality, great sound, super intimate, interesting versions of all of the songs, and some songs that didn't make it to the record at all, and some other ones that made it in different forms. Then there's 2 records that are live recordings from the Heartbreakers concerts throughout the years, playing the tracks from there, which are really, really good. And then you have the final 9th LP, and this is like a limited blah, blah, blah version. But it's got even more stuff that was sort of like put on there to, you know, it was like early versions or kind of versions that didn't make the album cut, or some songs, there's a couple songs that I thought, wow, this would have been awesome on this record, but they didn't make it on there. So there's a 7-disc version, I think, of this, or an 8-disc LP. There's a 3 LP version. There's a 2 LP version, and then there's CD versions of all that. And there's downloads. And this came with a download code as well. So you can download it in 2496 uncompressed audio. But that's where it kind of the segue comes in. Like the quote unquote CD master made of this was more limited, was run through more limiting and more compression to squash it and get it up. So we have to, you know, we basically have that to listen to if you download the CD version or the MP3 version. But then you have the 2496 version, which has no compression on it, and the LPs apparently have no compression other than what you would normally do in, you know, in cutting an LP master. So it's really like I've been listening to this since October, November or something, and you can go so deep into it if you want to, and really compare to different versions, the different digital versions, the different LP versions, whatever. So if you're a fan of that music at all, it's pretty amazing stuff.
I'm pretty sure it's been a couple years now, but the place that I worked at before LTA was a record pressing company, and they pressed that record along with all other Tom Petty records. And when I left, I was able to go into our room that had all of the, you know, our extras and, you know, customer, you know, we kept some records that we could give out to people as samples and things to, you know, try to get them to use us. Anyway, so I was basically given carte blanche to go in there and take whatever records I want, which is fantastic.
Wow.
And my wife's favorite artist is Tom Petty. But we didn't have, I mean, box sets like that are off limits to that sort of, you know, grab and go sort of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately I was unable to grab that. And, you know, we also did Metallica and all this. So I couldn't get all those cool box sets, but I got some cool records.
That's a great story.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That'd be quite something. I've never been to a vinyl pressing plant. I've seen obviously photos and videos and stuff, and it seems like quite an ordeal.
Yeah, you definitely should. I highly recommend it. And for the one main reason is, so we would have, you know, sometimes clients would be able to come in and see, you know, they might be coming through on tour, or, you know, maybe they were local and they could come in and see their record, you know, being pressed, or at least, you know, pick it up after it was pressed. And so I would walk them around this giant 50,000 square foot facility, everywhere from, you know, where we got the jackets in from the printer all the way through to, you know, actually, you know, pressing the record and then finishing it in the sleeve and the jacket and shrink wrapped and shipping and everything else. And the thing that you notice when you go through that with a record, as opposed to even a CD, any other physical media, is how many human hands are involved in a record and physically touch it. You know, from the printing of the jacket to even once it's all in the same building, you know, you know, going through each of those steps that I just described, easily I mean, at the very least, a half a dozen people are touching this record at some point, throughout the process, and probably closer to a dozen. And, it's called, if you look at it, any of these places, it's called your record pressing plant, right? It's very manufacturing, but, unlike CDs or other manufacturing, it's more of an art form to press a record, and the level of human interaction in it is required, and because they're listening to it, the conditions are changing when you're pressing a record. It's truly remarkable. And no one who had ever been on a tour with me on a record or through the plant ever complained about how expensive the records were after that, right? Some clients would complain, oh, why is it so expensive? And of course, people on the consumer end, complain all the time, why should I pay $30 for this record, or $20 or whatever it is? But think about all the different human hands that touch a record, as opposed to a CD, which just boom, boom, boom. A robot can do the entire thing literally, and it's an impressive process, and makes it even cooler from an experiential perspective. Because then you rewind. I always thought about, you rewind to all the humans that were involved in the mixing and mastering, and then of course the recording artist, and then them sitting in their bedroom, writing it when they were 16 years old, or however old they were when they came up with the song itself. So I always liked just following that human process.
Yeah, I mean, especially something like this, where you have this whole book that comes together, and it's got a slipcase for every record.
You can't imagine
for this
the logistics that go into putting that together. Yeah. I pulled many weekends at the plant, where it would be sort of all hands on deck, and, the people figuring that out are fantastic to get that right when you're producing, thousands of those sorts of things. And, there's probably 30 pieces to that package, including the box that it came in and everything else. So it's a really complex process that, is completely overlooked in, for the record buying public.